Clock is on. Light is
Oh,
on.
Oh, hi there.
I gotta do the thing.
Hello.
Hello. This is the Common Book Show. I'm Paula, and I was just turning my phone off so I could be polite. I am here today with Richard and Greg and Brian and Tom, my son, on drums. And we're going to start the show off with my poem about Damar Hamlin, which is considered controversial by my friend Joni Russ, who asked me to write a poem about him, and I warned her. I warned her that it would not be appropriate for a lot of people, and she said, write it anyway. So I did. I'd been thinking about it. It had been going through my mind, so I kind of just had to let it ferment, and then I sat down and wrote it out. Okay, so the Romans roared, gladiator down. The sound goes soft as if you could hear a heartbeat, if there was one. He was as good as dead as the thumbs went up in the crowd. Let him live. He served his purpose well. The life is breathed back into his body. They cart the fallen player away. Each week, men come to blows for fun and profit. The sons of the patricians are not on the field. Only those who aspire to gain in gold what they sacrifice in well-being. The owners vie for bodies, strong and young to own, for their profit and pleasure. No cotton is picked, no chains, but for the promise of riches beyond a poor man's mind. The blows are grave. The uniform and colors that make a team of individuals protect the head, but not the neck, support the shoulders, but not the heart. Aging children throw themselves into the arena, man against man. No enemies or hatred, but controlled violence against another who is just like you. A poor boy with a dream of riches beyond comprehension, owned by a richer man who will not stop the games once one has fallen. You are taught that the game goes on without you. You rally in your hospital bed and wish your team to play on, and further wish to return to the most dangerous game yourself. The adulation is addictive. It shapes the mind in a way that cannot be imitated. You are not whole without it. The future will see us as barbarians, but we cannot see through the curtain to see how we are just like the Romans, who tossed Christians to the lions for sport. I believe our mind is evolving and has evolved since the days of the gladiators. We read our history and cringe at man's inhumanity to man, but cannot deduce how our own will be read if there is anything left in 2,000 years.
Good poem.
I think football is savage, but I understand that people don't feel like that.
Some people do.
Well, some people do, but I mean,
Oh.
I see it as a money-making. It's just about profit. You know, we talk about this all the time on the show.
Well, it's a business, and they're ruthless businessmen who want to exploit the workers to make more profit for themselves in their luxury suites and in their mansions. That makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. It's just that, you know, and people
It's just normal business.
people are doing it willingly because in our culture it's culturally you're a hero.
Well, they do get more women, more money, more popularity, more fame, more violence that they like because they're young men who are violent. They like the violence. They like the women. They like the fame. They like the drugs they get. They like the adulation. They like the adrenaline rush. They like testing themselves to the limit. They get a lot of things out of it.
I
They have
know.
nice
And
matching outfits.
It's better than working at McDonald's.
It's better than working at McDonald's
Oh,
and
for
being a
sure.
running back and making 250,000 or 850,000 or a million is
Yeah.
better than being at McDonald's.
And
Yeah.
like you said, when they go back home to their neighborhood,
They're hot stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
what surprises me though, and we were just talking about this recently, is that they are they only take these athletes from colleges.
In,
There's
in football, they do.
yeah, in football, there's no way for a younger person, a young man who doesn't go to college. So they are educated to a degree. I mean, they've got a degree in
Yeah.
from a
Some of them do.
university. Some of them
basic
do.
education.
But so they are capable of a, earning a living, like a decent living, and not a ridiculous living like they're going to earn as a football player. I'm surprised that there is no avenue for a high school, a really good high school player, to become a professional, like there is in baseball,
And
right?
basketball,
And basketball.
but not in the football.
Aren't there walk-ons?
Yeah, it's rare.
It's such a
Like
rarity.
Tony Romo was a walk-on supposedly,
It's fairly rare though.
meaning he skipped the college route.
And he went like directly from high school to tryouts.
I don't know. Did he go?
I
from
don't
No,
know
high
he,
about-
school?
he was in college. I can't remember where it was though.
Yeah, I don't know his whole career. Yeah.
Look it up on the Google.
All I know is I don't like
I think
Tony
he's definitely in
Romo.
college.
Oh,
What's wrong with him?
But no, one major aspect though, if you listen to the ex NFL players though, is the social aspect of a lot of those guys really, they don't do it for the fame, they don't do it for the money, they do it to help their poor families.
well,
and then
that's-
when they
That's the
get
money.
Yeah.
and then when they get injured earlier in their career, like Damar Hamlin, it could have been like say he was paralyzed from the neck down or something like that. His money making years would have been over, and his hopes for his family would have been over too. So, it's a big deal. It's for those guys.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you never see rich kids becoming football players. They just don't do it. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they be, sometimes become rock stars or movie stars, but they're not going to put their
Yeah.
bodies on the line like that to play a sport like football. I mean, hockey, yes, there are fights in hockey. There's checks in hockey. There's, people get their teeth knocked out,
Hockey's
yada,
brutal,
yada,
yeah.
yada. But it's not as bad as football. Football is unrelenting. At least with hockey, you get to skate across the rink a couple times before you're hammered into the, into the side or whatever that's called. But with
Boards?
football,
Yeah,
the
the
board, yeah.
boards.
With football, it's like you can't go like a couple feet without getting like stomped on. Like you're
It's
getting.
supposed
Yeah.
to be that way.
I know that's the whole point of the game.
Yeah, it's because it derives, or at least it's a lot like rugby or, one of those kind of things.
Yeah.
It's like rugby.
Yeah.
It's like a scrum.
Yeah. So I have my so poor Joni. She was going to send all the poems that she got from the other people that she asked for poems. They were saying how the community rallied together and how Damar Hamlin was so brave and how everybody
don't care about
was
that.
so.
You got right to the crux
Well,
of it.
no, that's what I thought of it. I wasn't going to write something that I didn't. I mean, why write something that you don't believe? That's
Yeah, I never do.
it's not a thing.
I do think there was a genuine element of people across the country that, not just out of sympathy, but I think I was saying to Richard, I think it struck a lot of parents, especially, and men too, men that don't often get in touch with their feelings, that looked at Damar Hamlin, who's barely out of his teens,
Yeah.
and his life was almost snuffed out like a candle, and everyone that had a son like that age, or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
child, they really empathized with that.
Right. It was
They felt
there
it.
was a point where we did come together emotionally
Right.
over this injury, but
But to your point, I think they way overdid it. Like after like a week, when every day on the news they were still talking about it,
Yeah, but
still
I don't-
talking about it, and still talking
yeah,
about it.
I
and-
don't. I think that I think that it was an anomaly, for something like this to happen.
Yeah, it was
during a
very
game.
rare.
But the fact is that they were able to sympathize, but they weren't able to extrapolate from that sympathy how how crazy this is that we do this.
Oh, right. No, actually, ex-NFL players did, though. If you watched all the sports
I
shows,
thought so.
Yeah. Okay.
Roman went to University of Eastern Illinois.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
but he just showed up at a practice. No, that's interesting.
no, but if you watched like I did for the next 2 days after
Yeah.
Hamlin went down on the field, and that night, all
Yeah.
night, guys that played in the NFL talked about how brutal
Yeah.
the game is. I mean, they really went into the psychology of it, and I was even shocked that some of them had the, balls to talk about it in the depth that they did, because these guys are basically making their living off the NFL.
And they have to. They have to.
And they didn't pull any punches. They were like, this is a brutal, brutal game. We know it's physical. We know it's violent, but we don't expect to die.
yeah. They have
Like,
to compartmentalize.
They were all talking about that.
They have to compartmentalize that. Is that the right word? Compartmentalize.
Yeah, sure.
They have
Yeah.
to do. They have to put that into a certain part of their brain while they're out there doing this. Because if they didn't, they couldn't do it.
And I think it did affect the Bills. They just had a pre-Super Bowl today. I just watched 3 different interviews with 3 different journalists that Stephon Diggs, the Bills wide receiver, gave. And he didn't come right out and say it, but he kind of intimated that he thought it really affected the psychology of the team. He said no one expected to see that.
Yeah.
It's not like anyone was prepared mentally. And he's like, I felt like the first 9 games of the season that we had a lot of energy and we were all together. And he said it did something to us. And I mean, you can't really calculate what that might do. Watching, I mean, they all might think they might break a leg.
Oh yeah.
They might get ribs broken. They get their face smashed in. I got my nose broken, my 2 front teeth knocked out playing football. But, and there was a kid in the Tonawanda Football League where I played who did die. But it was because he was born with a weak artery in his
Yeah,
brain.
yeah.
And he was running down a football field and his brain exploded.
Oh,
His
God.
artery exploded. And his parents were sitting there watching their 12-year-old kid drop dead in
Well,
front
at
of
least he
him.
went to heaven with Jesus for eternity, almost certainly.
Because
Oh.
Jesus loves football.
There's a
Jesus does love
there's a
football.
segue.
There you go.
Here we got a segue to the new Jesus commercials that we've got for the Super.
Yeah.
Well, apparently they've been playing them at a lot of sporting events, and we don't watch commercials, so I didn't
I've
see.
seen them.
Yeah, have you watched them?
Yeah. Because they're Jesus commercials. They're interesting to me.
Oh, okay. So
They
Richard,
just say at the end of every commercial it says he gets us,
gets
and then it
us.
says JESUS.
Yeah.
US. He gets us.
so
Hmm.
we have
Plus, I watch them in my spare time.
we have a commercial to play here.
There was an influencer who became insanely popular. Everybody started following him. Then, one day, he stood up for something he believed in. People got angry. The establishment called him an extremist, said he shouldn't be allowed to share his views. They would stop at nothing to shut him up. So they did what they had to do. They nailed him to a cross.
I don't know where to start with this.
Yeah, I agree.
The first thing I want to say.
If it's
The first thing I want to say is that they did get that right. The fact that Jesus was a rebel. He was speaking up for a different way of thinking about life and what change. He wanted to change. He wanted to not change, but correct what he felt was mistakes in Judaism. We always know everyone gets that wrong, right? He wasn't making a new religion. So the text is correct, but the people who are paying for these commercials and the information, like, I want to know what is in their minds that they're saying. Well, first of all, that Jesus gets canceled and he's crucified. That's just appalling. But because there's a big difference between being canceled in our culture, the way people are canceled, and being crucified for,
yeah, that
there's
was the first thing that struck me.
There's a lot of questions here, but the thing is, what are they thinking that their ideology is standing up for that's being canceled? Are they saying that their ideas about sexual orientation are so
No.
profound? I mean, but no, they have to be talking about something, because they're not talking about what we would think of as standing up for an idea, like standing up for, civil rights or gender rights, or, those are the things that a liberal would say, that would identify with that commercial. He's standing up for the things that are human rights. Human rights. What are they associating?
I think I know what it is. It's the common thread right now. There are certain, they happen to be Republican senators and congressmen, that actually get on the floor of the Congress and talk about the persecution of religion in the United States, which is absurd, because you're free by the Constitution to follow whatever religion you want. But they're also, the evangelical Christians are buying into this victimhood too, of where they're being persecuted. They've got this air of persecution that they keep putting out there because, and I don't really understand even how they ground that in anything in reality.
My sister,
But they do.
My
Believe
sister,
it.
who is his deceased now, she used to work at St. Joe's Hospital. My sister was a born-again Christian.
Yeah.
And so she worked as a receptionist. And as a receptionist, she got to talk to a lot of the people that came into the hospital. I think it was in the emergency room. So she would talk to all these people, and she would proselytize to these people in the waiting room. And she got in trouble over and over again for pushing her religious ideas onto these people who were in
But she was at work.
she was at work, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, I think something like that would be construed as religious persecution, that she's not allowed to
Right.
talk about, because
Right.
it's part of her religion to try to get you to be her religion.
Right.
And that's a major point of born again Christians. They want your soul. They want
your soul.
They want to get that soul and make sure it's going to. But then again, they believe that you don't go to heaven unless you're chosen, and you have the grace of God, and you're one of the chosen ones. So no matter what you do, you're not going to go to heaven anyway if you're not one of the ones that are chosen. So why do they want to get your soul if you've already been chosen? You're going to go,
Right.
even if you don't. I don't get the whole premise of this. But anyway, that's one thing that where they feel persecuted. They can't talk about it at work. They can't talk about it. You can talk about it on the street.
No, I experienced when I was 19 going to UB. I had a friend named Billy who was born again. And when I first met him, he seemed a really nice guy. He asked me, "Are you born again?" And I had already heard of it back in 1981 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And I said, "Well, how do you define that? Born again. What does that mean?" And he said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Yes." "Do you believe in Jesus?" "Yeah." "Have you accepted him as your personal savior in your heart?" I said, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "I'm a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic, et cetera, et cetera." And he's like, "Oh, no, but you have to become born again." And he's going into the whole litany of it. And he would actually look at me. This was after we were friends for months. And he'd say, "You know what, Brian? You're just a wonderful person, and I really love you. And it saddens me that you're going to hell." And I would laugh, and I would say, "Really? You know that I am going to hell?" And he's like, "Well, you have to be, because you're not born again." And then I said to him, "Okay, Billy, now I know, because I've read about it. I know how many born-again Christians there are on the planet. It's like a few million people or whatever. So are you actually saying that you believe that the other 5 or 6 billion people are all going to hell, no matter what they've done in life, no matter how good they were, their good actions, bad actions, whatever? Everybody but those 25 million people that say they're born again and have accepted Jesus as their personal savior, only those people are chosen and going to heaven. Everyone else, billions of people, are going to hell. And that would make his brain just sparks would start coming
Well,
out.
you know,
And he'd go, well, yes. And I feel like that's absurd.
Well,
Don't you see how
the-
absurd that
the
is?
Catholics used to. Well, in grammar school, the Catholics.
Oh, I know.
We were told
But-
that only Catholics go to heaven, but there was an out back then. There was purgatory. Purgatory was where all the good people who were not Catholics got to go. And then they got rid of purgatory. So what does that mean
Yeah,
to the
I know.
Catholics? If only Catholics are going to heaven, you know. So that whole
See, I never bought that, though.
philosophy.
Even
Well,
when I was
no,
a kid, I never bought it.
It doesn't make sense. But you know what? As Mark Twain once said, choose heaven for climate and hell for company.
I never heard that. That's great.
Yeah, that's
Twain was awesome.
yeah.
Were Christians persecuted in ancient Rome?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You say yes?
I have no
Oh, yeah.
idea.
What do you say?
I say that from what I understand.
Well, yeah, none of us were there.
Yeah, what
Right.
I understand is that because they would not worship the Roman gods.
Something like that.
Yeah, they
There was a, there
they
was a-
wouldn't
there was a-
follow the ceremonies.
There was a reason Rome lasted 1,000 years, because whenever a people were conquered, they would say to the people,
Mm-hmm.
"What religion do you have?" And the reason we want to know is because we want to build a temple to your God
Right.
and put them in our square of temples. Right?
Mhm.
When they did that with the Christians, the Christians said, "We don't want you to build a temple.
Oh, right,
You
right.
don't want us to build a temple, we won't build a temple." But then you know what the Christians did? They stood in front of other people's temples and denounced the gods of that temple.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's
that didn't-
why the Christians were persecuted.
That didn't seem. That
because
doesn't
they
seem.
didn't go along with the toleration of Rome.
Because
Yeah.
they were trying to spread
Oh, yeah, there was-
Christianity to everyone and make them Christians.
Yeah,
So-
because you just think of from the Roman point of view, everybody gets their own temple, and now you have this one group going in front of other temples saying, "If you go in here, you're committing a sin and you're going to die,
Right.
etc."
Right.
The wanted peace. The Romans wanted peace, and the Christians were against that.
Well, okay, I can see that, and I can see where the Christians were, they wanted that one idea that they were right.
They were against idolatry.
Yeah, they were right, and
Yeah.
well, so were the Jews, but they weren't
Yeah.
standing in front of the temples and saying, they were just saying, "Leave us alone. We got enough problems."
Well, they had been
But-
killed enough times. Yeah.
So the Christians, if they were,
Yeah.
I can totally see them doing that, and I can totally see them. But there's a difference between taking the Christians and locking them up or taking them out of the country and throwing them to lions. I mean, there's a big to me that they were
The lions had to eat, Paula.
the persecution came from
Good point.
the punishment, not so much the fact that they were being assholes and the Romans didn't want them around harassing everybody else. Yeah, get rid of them.
They're a pain in the ass.
Throw them out of the country. But don't throw them into the ring with the Christians. I mean, that's a little much. With the lions, I'm totally against the eating of people in an arena.
But you said previously that you're not necessarily opposed to
cannibalism. That's true. Under certain
But just
circumstances.
lions eating them.
Well, it's for sport. For sport.
Oh,
Why-
for sport.
I mean, this is
Okay.
Here we're back to football. Didn't you say you had something else you wanted to talk about
About cancel culture.
about cancel culture?
Cancel
Okay.
culture.
Can you think of any instances where it fits, where it works?
I'm not. Maybe I'm not.
Because when I saw this come up in the news this week, it all made sense to me, what cancel culture is about. When Elon Musk took over Twitter, he said, "We're putting an end to cancel culture. Anybody can come on Twitter. Anybody can say and show anything they want." And then he learned the ways of the real world, that you can't do that.
Because there's crazy people in the world who are going to spread misinformation.
Well, not only that, but this week, a senator posted the following on his Twitter page, and he got canceled.
Okay. Well, canceled by. What is?
that's him with a animal that he
Just
killed,
killed.
And
Yeah.
his significant
and
other, or something.
showing how proud he is of the fact that he killed this thing.
Which looks like it's probably a rare creature in Africa or something.
Well, I mean, whether it's rare or not, it's kind of sick.
I mean, it looks to me
It looks
rare. yeah.
alive to me. It doesn't look dead to me. It looks alive. But it's a dead creature. You're
No,
saying.
it's
Do you think it would let it hold its head like this for a photo or a picture? If it
Well,
were
I don't know
alive?
if it had gotten a dart.
No, he's a hunter. He's got his orange
Yeah.
vest.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying it doesn't.
I know what you're saying,
But you know, it's most of the time when you're seeing these pictures, you can tell the animal's dead. This animal doesn't look as dead as some I've seen. But okay, so he was. What do you mean he was canceled? It was the picture was taken off
It
of.
says here the account of Steve
Suspended.
Danes is
Well, I know who he is. He's an
temporarily
asshole, yeah.
unavailable because it violates the Twitter media policy.
So what is the media policy that he violated by posting that?
That's-
Right. He probably, first of all, he probably got a permit to legally kill that animal, so he didn't break any laws. I'm assuming because that's what they do most of the time. Because I've read about sport hunting, and a few years ago, Donald Trump Jr. was in Africa killing elephants, and people freaked when he was posting pictures of him with his big gun next to the elephants and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And people like me that love elephants
Well.
and know they're being depleted in insane numbers, we're like, oh, you think you're a big man and you got brass balls for
You got a
using a
gun
giant
and-
cannon of a weapon against a basically defenseless animal from hundreds of yards away? And I don't think he was canceled, but it created a huge uproar
yeah.
among people that love animals. So I
So-
think that's what this is, but
But he was taken off of Twitter, and Elon Musk now has control of Twitter.
Right.
So, do you know what the rule was that he broke? That was it just
Well, I mean, I wish I knew all this material you're asking me, but
Yeah.
I just know what what
Yeah.
the cover story was.
yeah? So, personally, I find it offensive when people shoot wild animals like that for sport. I think it's appalling. I mean, I don't disagree with certain. I mean, people who are going to hunt deer and eat the meat. I mean, I find that less problematic than going to Africa and shooting wild animals that you're. What are you going to do? You're going to just have a trophy in your trophy room. I don't think that should. You know, we're not going to have many animals left anymore because everything's changing. Polar bears are almost gone. There's just we're depleting our natural resources, but do I feel that my opinion should cancel that man? And I don't. I
so
don't
you're saying maybe leave the post up, but let people say what they want to him.
Yeah. Like I would.
So you don't see anything outrageous about killing another earthling?
I do. I do. I don't like it, but it's my opinion.
Is that how you feel?
I don't know. I think kind of. I feel what Paula feels. I mean, the picture kind of glorifies the murder of this animal, but
I mean, what if it was a murder of a human being?
That's different.
different. Yeah.
So you see humans different from animals.
Yeah.
You don't
yeah.
see humans as human animals.
No, because right now
we are animals.
We are
but
animals.
We're a little
but
different.
That's what it means.
No, but you couldn't post a picture of yourself, killing a human being because human beings are different than and we eat animals, we use animals, we use their skins for clothing. I mean it is I'm not saying it's right, but it's culturally acceptable to kill an animal but to kill a human is a different thing. It's a different killing an animal and killing a human are two different things. the guy killed this animal and he's going to get a trophy out of it. I think he's reprehensible, but that's my opinion.
I kind of think like leaving that up on Twitter and letting people go after him and say, "What do you think you're doing?" and pointing out why he shouldn't probably do that is maybe a good thing.
He would get more feedback that way
Yes,
than
yes.
just being canceled. Because I mean, I wouldn't go on Twitter on a bet, but I think that there's a lot of people on Twitter who would let him know exactly what they thought of him for doing such a thing, and that might be a better lesson to him than thinking, oh, I'm going to get all this adulation for being this great white hunter killing this beautiful animal that I'm going to hang the head in my den, you know.
Yeah.
But you're not going to, you know, the people that have to screen the YouTube stuff there's like people in foreign countries that are screeners who have to look through all this content. They're suing YouTube for messing up their minds because
Really?
because they see
Some crazy
see
stuff.
beheadings,
Really?
murders,
Yeah.
pedophilia. They see all this stuff
Yeah.
that comes through, and they're witnesses, and it just completely screws them up. And so, you know, we live in
I still feel like the internet tends toward, even though its computers are just machines, the way it's been used by people has, like, evil's probably the wrong word because it's got connotations of religion, but it's been more negative than positive, the internet, to me. It's created more divisions among people. It's everyone that's harbored little angers and grudges against other people, they can all get together and amplify it.
well, you didn't know
And-
before how people were thinking. You didn't
No,
know
I'm-
as much.
no.
You had your own circle. You had your own circle. You had your own newspapers that you would read. You were isolated. Now you see it all. It's all out there.
In seconds.
All these people who think differently than you do, and who are destructive and angry people. They have a platform, and they think there's something wrong with people who think like us. So, you know, there's all this division now because we know what's going on. We know. I mean, people like us thought, at least Barack Obama was elected. I thought racism is really
On the way out,
diminishing. It's
yeah.
diminishing. It's so great. But look what happened. You know, there were all these people who thought differently than we did, and who thought this is a travesty to have a black man running our country. You know, I didn't know those people existed before the internet because I didn't associate with them. I only associated with the people who were like-minded, and I didn't know. And maybe that's good that we know now, you know, that these people exist. But how do we come together? Any ideas?
Well, I think this show is a positive as far as being on the internet and everything. And there's definitely good to the internet. I mean, the knowledge that's at
Oh,
your
yeah.
fingertips, it's amazing. And I'm a news junkie. I go to news, not as much as lately I haven't been doing as much because I get depressed, I think, a little bit sometimes. But I used to go to news websites a couple hours a day.
Yeah.
And
There was a
I don't know.
you had said something and it struck a chord, and now the chord has been
The thread is,
the thread is gone. But you know, it's just odd to know that there's so much people think so differently. You know, you tend to think that people think like you. You know, or at least they should think like you. Which is the problem on both sides, you know. All those people at right-wing people think, what the hell's wrong with these people who are these bleeding
The
heart
libtards.
liberals, what's wrong with them? Don't they see that they're making the world worse? That they're giving people too much, and they should be making them work for things. And I mean, and we are saying, what is wrong with these people? That they don't want to help people get the basic necessities out of life. That they want to keep everything for themselves because they think they worked for it. Blah blah blah. So we can't. We can't. There's no middle ground here. I don't know. I don't see any middle ground. Hello, Greg. Would you like to contribute to this conversation?
I picked up a couple new books yesterday. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
Go ahead.
No, Greg, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
What do you have on there?
Nothing. Just about Tony Romo. We already talked about that.
Oh.
Go ahead. What are the books?
And I don't want to talk about Tony Romo anymore. I don't
What are
like
the
him.
books?
I picked up 2 books at the Kenmore Library, and I looked for you yesterday.
Right. I wasn't there yesterday.
Yeah, you weren't there. I was disappointed.
Agreement.
I was looking forward to seeing you in the back room, like kind of saunter by, and I'd go, "Hey, Greg,"
Right.
and
Just one of those things.
Oh,
You
that's
weren't
right,
there.
because you're in Amherst now. That's right.
right, but and I looked on the computer for where the Amherst Library is on John James Audubon Parkway. I don't like going on the highway anymore. Like, I had to go on the highway to come here. It's really the only direct way to get here from where I am now.
Yeah.
And I hate the highway. I was saying that to my mom yesterday, and she's like, "Yeah, I hate driving on the highway."
You can
too."
go Union. You can go straight Union.
Yeah, it's too far though
Yeah.
that way. And so I'm looking on the computer where that library in Amherst is. It's in the middle of I'm like, how do you even get there if you don't go on the highway? It's
There's
fucking ridiculous.
one on Main
It's
Street
also
too.
it's being
Yeah, but that's a lot of traffic, and I hate Main Street in Williamsville.
Yeah.
It's always like people like,
I know.
And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to go to the Kenmore Library, and then I stopped by my mom's on Delaware,
Oh, so she's
that
close.
worked out.
Yeah.
And she's Delaware and Sheridan area, and so I got these 2 books. One, I was like, what is this? It's called Bob Goes to Jail, and I'm like, all right, because I pretty much just read nonfiction these days. I don't even remember the last fiction book I read in the last 10 years. There's something, but a couple of them. But Bob Goes to Jail, and what is this? By Rob Sedgwick. And it's Kyra Sedgwick, the pretty famous actress's brother, Rob. And apparently he grew up in the 70s, and they were Kyra and Rob's parents were pretty well off, and they lived in this huge, amazing apartment that he said was like bigger than most people's houses in the 1970s in New York City. And he turned out to be a drug dealer in Manhattan in the 70s, and he ended up going to like Rikers
Oh, nice.
for a few years. But he was on soap operas. He was acting before Kyra.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, no, she was acting, but she didn't get any professional gigs yet. He was on some soap opera. I don't remember which one. And then he was in a couple smaller movies, and he thought he was really hot shit. And
Did you get the book from the library?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so I started reading it today, and it's actually kind of good. Better than I thought it might be. He's not an amazing writer, but he's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
This is it.
yes. But he has been clean for like 15 years now. He got into drugs, and he was dealing like 500 pounds of weed every 2 weeks
Oh my God.
in Manhattan. He was into it big. And, it was through a friend of a friend that he went to high school with. It was all like
Yeah.
serendipity. So that's pretty cool. And then the other book is by a Columbia professor of psychiatry at Columbia University in New York, and it's called Drug Use for Grown-Ups. And he did, starting like about 25 years ago, the National Institutes of Health gave him a boatload of money to do drug research, And he sat in a laboratory at Columbia and got people high on all kinds of different drugs, recorded their reactions, gave them intelligence tests, gave them things to do to see if the drugs, how it affected their performance on different tasks. And his book is basically debunking like 90% of the myths on drugs. Like he said, he did years and years of research on marijuana, and he found out that it basically was negligible in its effects on people's memory and people's performance on tasks that required. And guess what?
I have some personal experience that would.
No. This is overall. This isn't just one friend that you knew
Yeah.
that might have had psychiatric issues. He points that out.
No, I'm saying me. My
Right.
own responses.
No. This is after testing hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the data. He has all the data. And guess what? After 40 years of research on marijuana in England, where there's not all the restrictions that they
Yeah.
have in the U.S., they found out the same thing. They found out after 40 years of intensive research on 20,000 people that smoked pot for years, they found out that the short-term memory effects were negligible on most people, and they found out that it didn't affect their intelligence. And he's saying that like all this goes back to like the reefer madness and beyond the reefer madness, where it's been a social construct where to keep people in their place in society, that they started the whole drug war was conceived
but how
to
about
keep
alcohol?
people.
There's
He talks about alcohol too. It is a
there-
drug, yeah.
Yeah, but because alcohol, there is every time you drink, you kill off brain cells.
Yes and no. That is also old
Yeah.
info that they spewed for
Well,
years and years.
I worked for the
And-
at the University of Buffalo in the drug and
Right.
And
Well, it does
alcohol.
kill brain cells, but the thing is, you have 3 trillion brain
Yeah.
cells. So if you drink 5 or 6 beers, it might kill a few hundred or a few thousand brain cells, but you've got trillions or
Yeah, I don't
billions.
know.
You've got billions of them. So
Right.
now, if you're a heavy,
the su-
everything is in different
Moderation,
measures.
Yeah.
Like if you're like my friend who passed away a year and a half ago, who drank 30 beers a day, yeah, it's going to fucking kill a lot of brain cells. But if you drink 1 beer a day, is it really going to
Well,
affect you
yeah, I'm
that
not,
much?
I'm not talking about that kind of.
No, I
you
know, but so
mild
it's all
moderation.
extremes, though.
But- right.
It's all
And-
extremes and different. There's different levels. Like he's just talking about people that intelligently, his thing, and I think he takes it a little too far. I was just reading a couple chapters today, so I'm only 2 chapters in, but he really leans in the direction of saying that there's almost, like what did he say? Even people that use heroin, only 30% truly become addicted. That's what his data show.
Yeah, that's
And-
that's surprising. I mean,
And I mean, this is what his supposed
Yeah.
data shows, and he's a legit,
Right.
psychiatrist.
well, in
and-
This is
Um,
the book, by the way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In Canada, in Canada, they came out with their medical, the people in their medical hierarchy came
Yeah.
out and said that 0 alcohol is recommended.
Yeah,
And
this has been going back and forth lately for
Yeah.
years. They were saying 2 to 3 glasses of wine or 2 to 3 drinks a day was fine. They said that 5 years ago. Now they're saying more than 1 a day, or even
Yeah.
1 is bad. They just said that like a couple weeks ago. But he pointed out how
How old is this book? Is it what?
2021.
Oh, so it's.
He's
it's
been doing this
pretty
research
fresh.
since the late 90s.
Yeah. Huh.
For
It's-
2 decades.
It's interesting. I'd like to see all the research,
And,
though. You know, I mean,
but no, but he pointed out he was in the Air Force. He was a military policeman in the Air Force. He was as straight and narrow as you could be. He didn't believe in drugs at all. And he said he believed all the social shit that you hear, that anyone that even smoked pot is a retard, or that anyone that does drugs is like a social lowlife. And he believed all that shit until he started studying chemistry and science, and then he started doing research on it. And he said that he himself, he freaked himself out because he started realizing like it was another scientist that started thinking about looking at all this in a different light, because he had all these preconceptions and all these prejudices that he went into it even when he started doing all these scientific tests on people with drugs, because he was given all this money to do it. And he said for years he looked down on people that did drugs. And the more he did work with people doing these drugs under controlled circumstances, he saw that it really didn't have all those evil, detrimental effects in every case that like people said, and he started seeing it from a totally different light. Now, I think he goes a little too far. Like, just from the first couple chapters, he makes it sound like, and I mean, you'd have to read those chapters because he does qualify what he says. He doesn't say, he says right out in the first few pages, I'm not encouraging drug use. I'm not telling people to go out and use drugs. I'm not telling people it's safe to use drugs in every instance.
Yeah, that whole thing about only 30% of people that use heroin are going to become addicted. That seems.
That's what his research.
Yeah, that seems
showed.
unlikely to me. Heroin is so addictive.
See, but he blew that out of the water. He said that's what they've said for 100 years, and it's not. It was never proven. It was never proven. He's like, if you take 1,000 people and have them try heroin, like there's underlying. Not everyone becomes addicted to drugs, is his whole major point. There's people that can try cocaine, they don't become addicted to it. There's people that can try heroin, they don't become addicted to it. But there are people with underlying addictive personalities, and he said a lot of those people have psychiatric issues. He said people that don't have underlying psychiatric problems normally don't become addicted to drugs. There's like a lot of different factors involved.
Well, I
I've
don't
heard
know.
that too.
Yeah, I don't know many people.
Did you know about that rat experiment?
No, what's that?
You have rats in a cage.
Oh, the rats. Is it the? Okay, go ahead.
Well, there might be people in the audience.
I
who
thought
haven't
you
heard
said.
from that.
I thought you said rat.
Oh, you mentioned this before. It's really interesting.
No, but I.
RATS.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. And you have a regular water in one bottle and water with heroin in the second bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you notice as they're living in the cage that the rats will gravitate to the water with the heroin in it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you do this with enough rats, and then you take half of them, put them in a different enclosure with greenery and female rats and little rat toys and things to do,
Mm-hmm.
and you have both water bottles,
Mm-hmm.
those same rats go to the regular water.
Wow. Now that's interesting.
They don't want to go to the other water because all their other needs are being met. Now, I think that's what Brian is saying.
Yeah.
That's
That
what
when-
this guy was saying in the
that
first
during
couple chapters, that a lot of it's social,
During-
too.
Yeah.
During Vietnam,
Mhm.
a lot of people in Vietnam were using heroin
My uncle was addicted to
to
it
cope
there.
with it.
Yeah.
Yet
Yeah.
when they came back and there was a prediction
Yeah.
of a big pandemic for heroin, it never
Yeah.
happened. Because they came back to a loving family, to things to do.
Wow.
See? They were
Mhm.
taken out of that environment that deprived all their needs and put into an environment that satisfied their needs.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, in Vietnam, it was an escape.
Yeah. Well,
And there was a lot of them smoked pot too,
Yeah.
because they were trying.
that was
to,
my first pot
um,
experience. Was the
you
guy,
know.
my mother's tenant, her son came back from Vietnam with Thai stick,
Mm.
and he asked me, and I was like, what, 15, and he asked me if I'd ever smoked pot before, and I said, oh, what do you think, I'm a kid? Of course I've smoked pot before. Of course I didn't. You know, and I started smoking pot with him because he was pretty young. He was like 19, and he couldn't believe, because I wasn't getting high, because you know they say that happens when you first start. Sometimes you can, the first couple times you try it, nothing happens.
Mhm.
It happened the third time. But yeah, so
No, as far as marijuana, I've known people that don't do well with it at all. I've had personal close friends and they told me I don't think I should smoke it because I don't react well to it. I get too paranoid, and even their eyes would get like allergic reactions, and I'd say, well, don't smoke it then. It's not good for you. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And I always in high school, I only smoked marijuana my first year of high school, and then I became a pretty serious athlete. In my last 3 years of high school, I didn't smoke at all. I didn't smoke until like later in college when I was like 23 or 24. So when I was 14, I smoked. Then I didn't smoke for 7, 8 years or something like that. But we would hang out in North Buffalo, and I'd go to parties and stuff, and people would push pot on people and say, come on, smoke pot. And I'd say, and some kid would go, no, I don't really want it. And some of the people around me would go, no, do it. And I'd say, hey, don't push that person into doing that. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. Don't push it on them.
Yeah.
And then I heard stories about people dosing people with acid, and I got really fucking mad about it. And I'm like, how can you do that? How can you put drugs in somebody's beer like that when they don't even know they're going to be getting drugs in their body, and then all of a sudden they're having this drug that's doing all this to their mind, and they're not prepared for it. You can't just give somebody drugs without their knowledge. And I had a close friend at UB that somebody did that to him at a party, and he almost ended up in a mental institution. And when he told me about what happened, I was furious. I was like,
Yeah.
who are these people? Who did this to you? They're assholes.
Yeah. I mean, that happened
I
a lot.
mean,
People would-
but
shouldn't have done that PCP.
Right.
so I don't know.
No.
But basically what that guy was saying in that book is that it's a lot more complicated, and there's a lot of social
It's an interesting
stigma.
It's an interesting take, and I like the fact
And-
that Richard had that thing about the
Yeah.
rats that tied in with that, because it shows a connection there. So, where are we? What else is on your list? Do you want to say something, Greg? You haven't said anything the whole time.
Say something, Greg. Say something.
I'm the weak, loud type.
Yes, he decided he's not the strong, silent type. He's the weak, loud type. That's true. You are. What else is on your list, Richard? We got like 5 minutes left.
I was reading an article about this new TV series called The Last of Us, and how they were raving about the writing is so good in this
Yeah.
series that it'll go down with, like, Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad as one
Yeah.
of the great series. So I had no interest in another zombie series.
Zombies?
It's a zombie. It's a straight out zombie series.
Okay.
And I was telling Brian about it, and he raised the question. He said, why do you suppose at this moment in history a lot of zombie movies and shows are being written and
And
produced?
end of the world apocalyptic movies and shows. There's a ton of them.
Well, we do know that science fiction writers kind of are prescient, which is a little scary when you think about. I mean, zombies. I don't think zombies are going to be a thing, but I think there's a lot of zombie mentality.
Yes.
Give
Exactly
an-
what I think.
Give an example of zombie mentality.
People that don't really think for themselves.
Yeah, the attack on the Capitol. That's
Yeah.
zombie mentality. People just following blindly without thinking things through. Jordan Klepper, who was amazing. I don't know
I
if you've
love
ever
him.
seen his interviews with the MAGA crowd, but he will interview these MAGA people, and they're just profoundly
great.
stupid. And he'll even say things like in a tone of voice that makes it sound okay. He'll say something to them, and they'll agree with him because they're not even thinking while he's speaking. And that's a zombie mentality.
Yeah, he even repeats things that like Trump said, and then when he says it, they don't even realize that Trump actually really said it.
Yeah.
They think it's made up or something
If you
like
haven't
that.
seen any of these Jordan,
seen 'em.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
I just love him. I just think he does a marvelous job with that. And he's brave because he goes into these situations.
Oh, yeah.
And he could definitely get hit over the head. but
It's the way he does it, though. He's so affable,
affable. That's it.
and
He's
people
very
just—he's
affable.
tall
Yeah.
and he's friendly, and people are disarmed by it, and they think he's just being like
They-
naive. He doesn't really know about this stuff, and he wants to find out what are the Trump people thinking, and he knows.
But they're so.
But
they-
What conditions were fertile that gave rise to the zombie mentality?
Well, I just read something recently about how when there were all these infighting with religions in other centuries, that they would demonize the other religion and say things like, and I see if this sounds familiar, they eat children, they have sex with children, they are cannibals, you know, and make up all of these huge things so that people would rally against this group.
hmm
And so we've got that going on now, but it's political. It's not religious. And it's a political fervor that was, I think, induced by us actually having the audacity to elect a brilliant, well, maybe not brilliant, very smart black man to the highest office in this country. That's what triggered all of this. It was backlash because they still believe that there's something different about people with different color skin.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, there was a lot of people saying that they think that Barack Obama's election created a huge wave of backlash. That all those people were there the whole time, and I always knew that they were there, but maybe not they
yeah.
to that degree.
The Tea Party was the beginning, and then
Yeah, the Tea Party.
and then other people said, "Hey, I think like that too," you know.
Mhm.
So I'm not the only person that thinks like this. All those people think like this, you know, and then it just. Do you think there's any hope for? Do you think there's any hope for this whole idea that all this misinformation that we're getting on the internet is going to somehow stop or somehow be fixed so that we get truth in the news?
Well, if you're asking me, do I think that there will ever come a time in human history where there are no conflicts of ideas, I would say no.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. But misinformation is a different thing than conflict of ideas. I mean, you can believe one thing. You can believe that it's not healthy to help people out of poverty because you're making them lazy. You can believe that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not disinformation. And you can believe you have to give some people a lift because not everybody is equally able to take care of themselves. You know, you can believe both. You can believe one or the other of those things, and that's conflict. But you're not saying that the people who are getting welfare are devil worshippers who are eating babies in the backs of pizzerias. That's misinformation. I'm hoping that someday we figure out a way to, with freedom of speech, to weed out this kind of illogical and wrong lies. That's all it is, lies.
Now, this goes back to something we were talking earlier about cancel culture. You would still not be opposed to letting these people go on platforms and saying, this is true. People are eating babies, et cetera, et cetera.
If they put that out, then there has to be some kind of something that the responsibility of the platform they're using. They have to be able to say this is questionable information.
But still leave it.